Today we're going to make a delicious dessert called Queijadas da Graciosa. This is a dessert I discovered. I took a trip back east to Boston just on vacation, and as we were going there I heard there was a huge Portuguese market out in Fall River. So while we were heading to the Cape, we stopped by this market, and it was just an enormous Portuguese market. The bacalhau section in this market, where they sold salted cod, was bigger than most Portuguese markets I've been to on the West Coast. You know, they had so many olive oils, Portuguese wines, ceramics, but they deliver. I'll put a link in the notes, and here's their contact information. So when I was in the market, I picked up this box of Queijadas Graciosa. Never heard of it. Bought a box, we tried them, and I figured I got to try to make these at home. And I've been kind of working on the recipe, and I think it's very close to what you could get from the Azores. The recipe comes from the specific island of Azores called Garaciosa. It's a small island. This recipe's been around for many years, but in 1991, a lady named Maria Jesus Santos Betancourt Felix opened up a little bakery on the island and started making these exclusively. Okay, so we'll begin the recipe. Add 2.5 cups of flour. For the full recipe, 3 tablespoons of sugar. I will add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now we're going to add 3 whole eggs, 6 tablespoons of melted butter, and you want to put enough water in the dough to bring it to the correct consistency. That'll probably be somewhere between 2 and 3 tablespoons of water. It's not a really wet dough. You just want it to form into a workable dough that you could roll out. Looking pretty good. And sometimes this takes a while, like a lot of doughs and when working with flour, just for the flour to get fully hydrated. Just always let it rest for at least an hour. So I'm going to cover the dough, put it in the refrigerator while we work on the filling. Now I'm going to caramelize the sugar. I add in 1/4 cup of water. All this water evaporates out because we're going to bring the sugar up to 360 degrees Fahrenheit. Water boils at 212. So the water all evaporates out. It just makes it a little easier to incorporate it and get it going and not crystallizing the sugar. And that's why I usually put in just a splash, like 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of vinegar. That also helps prevent sugar crystallization that sometimes could happen when you're making caramelized sugar. And now I'll put in our 2 3/4 cups of sugar. You want to bring it up to a light amber color. Again, get yourself an instant read thermometer. It just makes the accuracy so much easier. And you want to get it up to about 360 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been about 17 minutes. The sugar is caramelized. Check the temperature. It is about 360 degrees Fahrenheit. If you don't have a thermometer, put your caramel on a white plate as you're going along, and it should have this nice dark amber color to it. Now you want to open up your cans of evaporated milk. After the sugar fully caramelized, you want to let it cool down for about 5 to 10 minutes, mainly because that sugar is at like 360 degrees Fahrenheit, extremely hot. So as soon as you pour in your evaporated milk, you know, which is mostly water, you're going to get a tremendous boil. That's why you need to make sure you have a big pot just in case it didn't cool down enough, because the sugar, you'll see when you put the milk in, will just boil almost to the top. So it's good to be careful as you add in the evaporated milk. But this has been cooling, mine's been cooling down for about 15 minutes. So it's fairly good. It's still boiling a little bit. So put in your 2 cans of evaporated milk. And now I'm going to add in my butter. It'll just melt in with the mixture. So keep on stirring it at least until your butter dissolves into the mixture. And then we're going to let this cool down for at least 15 minutes. And the main reason is because we're going to add this to our egg yolks. You should have 12 egg yolks separated. If we added this really hot mixture to the egg yolks, they'll just cook right away. So we need to let this cool off for about 15 minutes. Then we're going to slowly temper this into the egg yolks. Either you want to get a second hand, a second person, your voa, to hold the bowl for you while you mix in your sugar, or you could put it in a mixer, put your egg yolks in a mixer, then slowly temper it in. So we'll add our egg yolks there. I'm going to add in 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, canela, and I'm going to put in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Now I'll slowly temper in my warm sugar mixture. And we'll put this mixture back in our pot. We are going to heat this up. So I'll put that on there. You'll want to use a whisk. This is a process where you really don't want to walk away from it. You want to keep on stirring because you don't want it to clump up, and you want it to evenly heat throughout. As it gets closer, like after about 5 minutes or after it gets, close to 160 degrees, you want to turn down your heat. It's nowhere near as thick as it's going to get. So you want to stir it until it gets to about 180 to 185 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 85 degrees Celsius. Okay, so it's been about 6 minutes. We are at 185 degrees Fahrenheit. And can you see how much, hopefully you could, I would say at least twice as thick. And so go ahead and turn off your flame or your hot plate. Keep on stirring, probably on and off for about another 5 minutes, and let it start to cool off. And you definitely could do this a day or even like 3 days ahead of time. You do want to let it cool down until it probably gets to at least like refrigerator temperature. I'm probably going to let it sit out for like 15 minutes, then put it in my refrigerator for at least 3 hours. After it cools down, it's going to be thicker than this. And then after you bake it, it even gets a little thicker. It turns into the texture after you cook it. The texture is similar to like a soft cheese. If you want to check out some more desserts from the Azorean Islands, I have one on Queijadas de Villafranca, and also probably my most popular video from the Azores, Bouge Lèvres. Okay, it's been about 4 hours since we made the dough. I pulled it out of the refrigerator about 15 minutes ago, just to let it soften up a bit. Okay, now we're going to butter our molds. I have a few different types of molds here, just testing them out. Traditionally, they're in a fluted mold. You could either use butter or a spray-on oil. Okay, I have our dough here, and you can see it's pretty firm, but it's definitely more pliable than it was before. And again, you do want to take this out of the refrigerator, so you want to take it out at least like 20 minutes before you're going to use it. So you shouldn't need too much flour, but we're going to roll it out to a pretty thin sheet. Again, like all dough, this has water from the eggs, and so anytime water interacts with flour, you develop gluten. So you have some gluten, and I already can see it like springing back. That's why every once in a while you got to roll it out and just let it rest for a little bit, maybe a few minutes, and then start rolling it out again. And traditionally, like the ones I got from the bakery from Maria Jesus Santos Betancourt Felix, it's a long name, some of those Portuguese names. It's a fairly paper thin dough, like less than 1 millimeter in thickness, I would say. So this might take some work here and some pressure. Okay, you can't do this by hand, but it's a lot easier with a cookie cutter. You want a cookie cutter slightly bigger than your mold, and just cut a little circle out. I'm not sure if you could see, that's definitely, I think, 1 millimeter or less, so it's pretty thin. As you're cutting these too, if they're just slightly small, you can stretch it out a little bit. You probably could get it like 10% bigger. Mine's it's already pretty thin, but you could just pull on it, almost like stretching out pizza dough. Okay, this filling has been in the refrigerator for about 4 hours. You can see it's really thick. Depending on your mold size, I would start by filling the molds about 60% full to the top of the crust, and don't go more than 80% full to the top of the crust. The filling will rise a little bit in the oven, so you don't want to fill them 100% full to the top of the crust, because if it spills over the crust, it makes it a lot harder to get out. It's pretty sticky. And this will get thicker after it cooks. Preheat your oven to 360 degrees Fahrenheit, about 182 degrees Celsius. And now you can put them straight into the oven. So they're going to bake at 360 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 to 35 minutes. The interior of the filling, you should see like little tiny bubbles coming from the middle. That's just showing that it's hot in the middle. And also the crust should just be a very light golden brown. Here's the finished product. You can see it rose slightly higher than the crust. After you take these out from the oven, you want to let them rest for about 15 to 20 minutes, but it's best to unmold them when they're still a little warm to go around with a sharp knife. In case they're sticking to the tin, it makes it a lot easier to get out. These are delicious. Make these for your family. Now go cook for someone you love.